Hello, can you hear me? Yeah, okay. Good afternoon, and welcome to the CSAIL Dertouzos Lecture series. My name is Daniela Rus, I'm the director of CSAIL, and I am delighted to be here with you today, and really excited to introduce our guest, Avi Wigderson. Now, he's coming to us from the Institute of Advanced Studies in Princeton, where he's the Herbert Maass Professor at the School of Mathematics. So, introducing Avi is a bit like introducing a rock star of complexity theory, except that instead of smashing guitars, he smashes the barriers in our understanding of computational limits. So, he's the type of person who can casually solve problems that make most of us break into sweat just thinking about them. Avi made very important contributions in complexity theory, especially in the role of randomness in computation. And he wrote a series of highly influential papers in the 1990s where he proved that computation can be efficient even without randomness. Specifically, he discovered that for algorithms that solve problems through coin flipping, there exists an algorithm that is almost as efficient and does not require coin flipping. And this has really changed how we think about complexity and randomness. He's also very creative, and he knows so many different branches of mathematics. He can truly make connections between different areas. And so, for instance, he developed famously the zigzag product, which connects complexity theory, graph theory, and group theory. And he really has made very unique contributions at the intersection of mathematics and computer science. Avi received his bachelor's in computer science from the Technion in 1980, and his Ph.D. in computer science from Princeton University in 1983. So for all the Ph.D. students here, consider this, 3 years from bachelor's to Ph.D. I would encourage you to be inspired by this. He did postdoctoral work at UC Berkeley, IBM Research, MSRI, and then he joined the computer science faculty at Hebrew University in 1986. He stayed there until 1999, where he joined the Institute of Advanced Studies in the School of Math and founded the Computer Science and Discrete Mathematics program. He received many awards, including the 2021 Abel Prize, and most recently, the 2023 ACM Turing Award, the highest honor we can get in computer science. And these awards are for foundational contributions to the theory of computation and for his decades of intellectual leadership in theoretical computer science. Now, Avi's colleagues say that he's the only person who can make NP completeness sound like a fun weekend project. And when he's not solving problems that have confounded the best minds for decades, he's inspiring the next generation of mathematicians to wonder, why didn't I think of this? So in short, Avi is here to make complexity a little simpler for the rest of us, or at least to make us wish we understood even half of what he is talking about. We're really honored to have him with us. Let's please join me in giving him a very warm CSAIL welcome. Avi.
Yeah, thanks. I'm really happy to be here. Thanks, Daniela, for this introduction. I must tell you, she's wrong. I'm not going to explain to you complexity theory today. I don't know, it should be on. Do you hear me? The mic should be on. Do you hear me in the back?
Maybe you can hold the microphone.
No, I cannot do this and talk. These are two things at the same time. Maybe the AV person can fix.
Can we get the AV people down?
Is it turned on?
Is this turned on? Yeah, it's on.
Let me see. Yeah, it seems like it's on.
Yeah, so I'll wait till you hear me.
Joseph, can you go in and get the technician?
Yeah, it's nice to have some suspense. Maybe it's, you think it's the other microphone? I mean, it is on, yeah.
It's on, maybe
So,
it's not placed in the right place.
yeah. Is it better? Yeah, okay. Okay, maybe it's better. Okay, so as Daniela said,
Yeah, just go touch it. It's on. You're good.
good, I'm good. I got a few months ago, as you know, I got the Turing Award, and I needed to, one of the responsibilities you get for a check of $1 million is to give a lecture, a Turing lecture. So I thought a lot about what I should talk about, and then I prepared this lecture, which I'll give you as well today. I decided to go and find out whether what I thought I knew about Alan Turing is complete. Like many people, I read basic papers, and I thought I knew. And then I discovered, reading many more and reading those I knew thoroughly, that I didn't know the half of it. So I'm going to tell you about Alan Turing's papers. This is roughly I'm not going to talk about personal life. These are basically the CV or the places that Turing worked in or was spent time in, and I'll go through basically each period, and maybe I'll stand like this, and I can read it better. I'll tell you about one paper essentially from each period, and I want to tell you also, this is a very varied set of issues and ideas. And I want to tell you also how it influenced, directly or indirectly, a lot of things that we do in the theory of computer science, in complexity theory, and so on. This works. Oh, I have to really stand on it. Okay. Now, in order to make this talk only 1 hour, not 3 hours, I'm skipping a lot of things. I will not talk about his work in designing and building computers, which he did. I'm not going to talk about quite a lot he wrote about the practice of programming. This is all at the time where people just started program. I'm not going to tell you about the paper he wrote in which he proved the most general form of the central limit theorem as an undergrad, but discovered that somebody else, Lindbergh, did it 10 years earlier. Anyway, amazing achievement for an undergrad. His paper on numerical analysis, in which he defines a condition number and LU decomposition, invents this. I'm not going to talk about his work on encryption, chess programs that he wrote, and his work on Riemann hypothesis in computing zeros of the Riemann zeta function, that ideas which are still used today in computing zeros of zeta function. So these are out. So let's see what we are going to have in the talk. So what is this? I hope this. Okay. It's not clear where I should stand. Because, it's all a question of vision. So let me get my glasses. So I'll stand here closer, and hopefully this will switch. So as a grad student, 85, Turing took a course from Max Newman, a topologist interested in the foundation of mathematics, a course, and they learned about Hilbert's dream, which, as you should know, was that truth in mathematics is the same as provability. Everything true you can prove, and moreover, everything you can prove, you can find the proof automatically by some mechanical procedure. Famously, this dream was shattered. Gödel proved his incompleteness theorem, violating the first equality, and then Turing proved that the second one, probability equals computability, is also wrong. This will resolve the so-called Entscheidungs problem, which is a German word in the title, meaning decision problem. Turns out that Church has written a paper. So Turing came with a paper to Max Newman, showed it to him, and he was amazed, but it turns out that a few days earlier he got a paper from Church which proves the same theorem, the Entscheidungs problem. And this is a nice story about a good mentor, Max Newman. He did two things. First, he made sure that this paper got published because Turing's proof was completely different than Church's proof. And the second thing, he told him he should go to Princeton and work with Church and arrange a graduate student fellowship for him. Princeton was the central place of logic and computability at the time, and with Church and many of his students. In order to resolve this decision problem, you want to understand, you're going to prove that something provable is not computable. What is computable? So you have to define this notion with general notion of computation, and this is it's a monumental task, and in fact it occupied people for quite a bit for the several decades due to Hilbert's program. What does it mean to have a mechanical procedure? By the way, thinking about these things today is sort of weird because we know all the answers already, but I'm trying to tell you to think as things looked in the 30s, last century. Gödel has his own notion of recursive functions to define computation. Church has his own notion, which is called lambda calculus. And then Turing, famously again, you know this picture, came up with his model of what computation is. And amazing simplicity for an amazing complex notion. All of computation is captured by this really simple, elegant device. It took a minute for both Gödel and Church to say, yes, Turing's is the right model. And moreover, Church coined the name Turing machine for this machine. That's how papers should look like. I mean by that when Turing writes this, he has to convince the readers that this captures all of computation. And he does for that, so it's called today the Church-Turing thesis. This model captures everything computable, but everything. And it does three things. He first shows that this machine can emulate human computers. As you may know or not, computer used to be a job title, mainly for women. He shows that lots of things that you think should be computable, like various mathematical constants, are computable by his machines. And thirdly, he shows that this is really equivalent to the other models, to lambda calculus and to recursive function. And until today, nobody violated this thesis. This really was the birth of theoretical computer science in the sense of mathematical foundations of the field of computer science. Of course, also the birth of computer science. Why? Because this is a completely formal mathematical model. You can prove theorems about it. And what happened a few decades later, given that you cannot only count the amount of time, the number of computational steps, and the memory units occupied by a computation, complexity theory was born when you start to quantify them, not just demand that they are finite. And the complexity classes were born. like everything computable in certain time t or certain space s. And since then, of course, the field has generated hundreds or thousands of complexity classes, which we have arranged in what's called the complexity zoo. Now, the theorem that Turing proved is that the halting problem, the question whether a Turing machine on an empty input, say, halts or not, is undecidable, is uncomputable, which is saying basically that you can never have a program to debug a general program. So Christos Papadimitriou has a very nice way of saying it. It says that the field of computer science in which you build programs was born aware of its limitations. Unlike, say, physics, where they didn't know the second law of thermodynamics or the uncertainty principle and so on. Anyway, this had an amazing impact on mathematics already, because computing something is one way to define what you can understand. If something is uncomputable, you cannot understand it. And Turing pioneered, and many others did, take central problems in mathematics and by reduction prove that they are undecidable, like the word problems in groups and semi-groups. And one breakthrough is, of course, the resolution of Hilbert's tenth problem. You cannot tell whether an integer polynomial has integer roots. But it also led to algorithms, things that are decidable, so things we can at least in principle understand because we can compute them in finite time, like the theory of knots or the first-order theory of the reals. It was not only done, but it was understood by mathematicians that trying to design algorithms for understanding structures reveals more structure. So there is more mathematics that comes out of designing algorithms. There are many more examples, of course. The way Turing proved it, he proved the lower bound. This lower bound I taught as for undergrads. It's key, the definition of a universal Turing machine, and it's key, the idea that programs or data are equivalent. Using that, one Turing machine can simulate another. So this technique he introduced is efficient simulation diagonalization. And of course, this technique is universally used. It immediately was used by the same paper I mentioned before to separate complexity classes, to show that more time buys more functions you can compute, more space buys more functions you can compute. And then non-trivial implementations of this idea went into proving separations of non-deterministic time classes, and even, I'm not sure how well known this is, there is actually a proof that P is different than NP if you restrict yourself to linear time. So more and more sophisticated versions of this came up. So Turing, I was sure, and I think many people I know were sure that non-deterministic machines were introduced in the 60s. But actually, I want to show you how Turing already thought of that. So he says most of my paper will be about deterministic machines in which one configuration determines the next uniquely. But there is a paragraph there saying it is also useful to think of a way where this, every state can determine one of several other states, and somebody has to choose that. And not only is he suggesting this, he calls them C machines, choice machines, basically non-deterministic machines. He said that this is useful if you are studying axiomatic systems, namely proof systems. So you can see these machines as actually verifying proofs, determining proof systems. So this is all about verification, whereas the deterministic machines are, of course, what we call computation, deterministic computation. Now this tension or this relation of computation and verification is an absolutely central theme of computer science, theoretical computer science. you can view Turing's result as separating verification and computation in the for finite algorithms, because these two classes that were defined after the paper but follow from the paper, recursive sets are those computable by finite algorithms, recursively enumerable those verifiable by finite algorithms, like the halting problem, and it proves that they are different. So verification and computation is different in the class of finite algorithms. And of course, the one central problem occupying us for decades now is the P versus NP question, which is exactly the same question when you restrict yourself to efficient algorithms, like polynomial time algorithms. The first paper on introducing NP-complete problems is actually named, Cook called it, the complexity of theorem proving procedures, relating directly to what Turing wrote in this paper. This notion, as I said, this is a huge subject, and the field, especially in the last few decades, invented lots of other notions of verification besides non-deterministic machines or proof verification, as mathematicians thought about it. They invented interactive proofs, probabilistic proofs, proofs with more than one prover, and these notions are extremely fundamental. They reveal the consequences of understanding of these characterizations that you see here. You don't have to really read it, but we understand precisely the relation between verification and computation in all of these cases, and all of these models of proof systems. And the meaning of these equality statements, these characterizations, is actually, each of them carries a very intuitive meaning, which I'm not going to go through. And moreover, the consequences to both theory and practice are, well, a subject of a different talk, which I'll actually give at Harvard on Friday. I want to switch to another paper. This was the longest I'll talk about the paper, and I'll now spend less time on it. I want to talk about oracles and how you relativize computation. This is a paper that Turing actually wrote when he was, that's his Ph.D. thesis in Princeton. He did it in 2 years. So it's called systems of logic based on ordinals. Basically, he was asking himself, okay, there's undecidable problems like halting. Suppose you could, so somebody gave you a solution to halting. Are there uncomputable problems beyond that? How do you reconcile this separation or Gödel's incompleteness theorem? What do you do about these things that are impossible? And he suggested adding functions as oracles to computations. This is what he writes. Let me not read it. He suggests that if there's something we cannot compute, or in general, any problem we want to think about it, he calls them number theoretic problems, but they are decision problems. If a machine cannot compute it, let's add it as a basic operation. Just query, tell me the answer of this. Are the things incomputable in this case? Notation we use today is the machine M given oracle access to O is just an arbitrary function. And you can just ask it queries in unit time. And in general, we can use just a complexity class with oracles from another complexity class. This idea of oracle, he suggests also the name, the oracle, was an absolutely fundamental idea in the evolution of recursion theory. I'll tell you a little bit, but just a quote from a paper of Post, who further studied this notion. He basically says in this paragraph that, well, Turing's technique works in much more generality, and here is one consequence. What several people did, they defined a hierarchy of harder and harder or larger and larger classes beyond R and recursive and RE. And the definition of the new classes is via oracles. You let the previous class have an oracle to, let's say, the halting problem, and you get another class in the hierarchy. Its hierarchy, you know, there's trivial inclusion upwards in this picture, but we know, and this was proved by these people, using Turing's technique, that this hierarchy is infinite. All the classes in it are completely distinct. Now again, when you go down to the efficient level, and this was done by Meyer and Stockmeyer, you restrict yourself to machines that compute in polynomial time, you get the polynomial time hierarchy, which looks exactly the same. And you can ask yourself, is it finite or infinite? We don't know whether P is different than NP, but maybe at some level. And here something really interesting happens. I mean, we don't know. The answer is unknown. But we can at least find an excuse for our inability to prove this. And the excuse also uses oracles. So let me tell you briefly how. And this is an evolution that was very important in the development of complexity theory. This paper in '75 showed that if you give P and NP the same oracle, let's say A, particularly chosen oracle, you can make them collapse into the same class. But there's another oracle B you can give them, and then they become separate. What this means, so why is it so important? It's so important because Turing's technique of diagonal simulations and diagonalization doesn't care if the machines have oracle or not. And therefore, the same technique cannot be used because of this result to separate P and NP. So we have an understanding of why we failed in this case. And since then, the field learned to develop more and more understanding of techniques and their limitations. It's very introspective, and there are many such results. We call them barrier results, results that show that a certain class of techniques cannot prove, let's say, P different than NP, or in general hardness of computation. And there are several of them, and there are ways of bypassing them, and then there are more barriers are discovered, and so on. So this is only one channel of using oracles. Let me move to the next paper. It's good if you lose me, there'll be another paper on a different topic. So I want to move to the World War II period, where, as I'm sure most of you know, Turing spent in Bletchley Park trying to break the naval Enigma machine of the Nazi army. So it looks in the picture, it's like a competition between two machines. One is the Enigma machine, a very sophisticated encryption machine, and what was called the bomb machines that were trying to sort of do brute force search for the key in order to decipher the German contact, mainly with the U-boats in the Atlantic that were, drowning convoy ships from the US to England, mainly with food and with war materials and so on. Understanding them, avoiding them, fighting them was absolutely key to the survival of England in the war. Churchill said that this ability discovered there in this Hut 8 of Bletchley Park was the greatest single contribution to the victory in World War II. And that's the way it's usually described in books. There's these bombs that are working very fast, running through many keys. But actually, what is not discussed usually is how much theory went into this, into the efficiency of these bombs. And I want to tell you a little bit about this, because that's very typical, again, of Turing. He's faced with this problem. This problem is actually pressing, right? Boats are, destroyed by these submarines. and lives are lost, and the equipment is lost, and it's a war. He still, thinks that you should build a theory in order to make this work and make it efficient and do it in time, and he starts proving theorems. And here the theorems are in, again, a different domain. It's probability statistics information theory. I want to tell you about two papers briefly. And you will note that these papers are not by Turing, they are by Good. Good joined the team, Turing's team, about a year later after, And they worked together on this project. There was 5 or 6 people in this team. And he wrote, after the war, he started writing a paper about the theory that was developed there. I want to tell you about one paper on the notion of weight of evidence and another about estimating population frequencies. I just want to say that Good gives full credit to Turing in one paper, the one on population frequencies. It says basically this formula which I'm giving to you, my main result in this paper, was shown to me by Turing and with the intuitive demonstration, namely with the proof sketch. And so he deserves full credit for that. And in a later paper, he talks about the other topic. He gives a survey, and again, you see the acknowledgments, Turing proved this, Turing proved that, so on. It's quite fascinating. Turing, I think, of course, the war materials were secret for about 30 years after. But Turing did write like lecture notes on some of these, but never published them in papers. Let me tell you about these problems. Again, they are cool, and they are central to make the bomb efficient in its search for keys. One is about estimating population frequencies. This is a basic problem in statistics. You are given n samples, IID samples from some distribution D on an alphabet sigma. You want to estimate what's the probability of some species, some letter that appears k times. Okay? And you'll answer immediately, k over n. Okay, that's the most naive and often correct estimate of the probability. Only there is a twist here, which is that the alphabet over which this is taken is far larger than the number of samples. The alphabet in their case was all German words. And the number of samples is much smaller than that. And then this estimate k over n is not known. In general, the number of things you see is far less than the alphabet size. So there are things you don't see. How do you estimate their probability? Or how do you estimate the probability of things you see given, suppose you are in a forest and you see 2 lions and 1 zebra and 1 giraffe, what is the probability of a giraffe? I mean, it's not a quarter. There may be tigers and monkeys and he suggests a formula. This is called today the Good Turing test. And you don't have to read it. It doesn't look like k over n. It depends on the number of species or the number of types that appear k times. It's very different, and you also need to smooth it. But we know today, this was not proved by them recently, that this is the best, smoothing appropriately, this is the best kind of estimate you can have, even knowing the distribution. You think that if you know the distribution, you can know it precisely, but that's, of course, not true, because if you see 1 giraffe and 1 zebra, it doesn't mean that their probabilities are the same, of course, but in the sample, they seem the same. Anyway, I just want to say that this kind of result, collaborations between theoretical computer science, statistics is all over the place, blew up in the last two decades. Let me tell you briefly about the other thing, which I'm sure many of you have seen, which he called weight of evidence. Basically, you want to distinguish 2 distributions. You have a sample, P and Q. You have a sample from P, and you want to know, how much information do you get from this sample which confirms that it actually came from P and not from Q. And Turing suggests, let's study this random variable, log of P of X over Q of x, log of this ratio. I'm sure many of you have seen it. He suggests this is a random variable. Study it, this distribution under the distribution of W under P. Many of you would know that the expectation of this number is today called the KL divergence. It's fundamental in statistics and information theory. They already had it. They studied it. They studied not just the expectations. They studied higher moments. They have amazing theorems about them. And turns out that they pre-discovered what's called today sequential analysis that was developed after the war by Wald. So all this was done by them beforehand, and this had, the obvious practical application to the cracking the Enigma machine, and there's a great theory evolving from it. So this is what he played with during the war. Okay, I have two more papers to talk about, which are, one is, I'm sure, familiar, and I was, that's one of the things that I knew about, but I didn't really read it through until a few months ago, and that's Turing work on intelligence. So he already, when he was in London a few years building the ACE, what's called the ACE computer, and then he moved to Manchester. And it's really curious that there was a position invented for him, which was called reader of the theory of computation. So already in 1953, there was a theory position. Reader is, of course, in England, is a professor. There he wrote the paper called Computing Machinery and Intelligence, which is, I'm sure, very famous. The point I want to make is, even before you get to intelligence, you look at what he writes, and he's talking about lots of other things that I had no idea that he talks about. One is probabilistic algorithms. So he already suggests that an interesting variant of the idea of a digital computer is a digital computer with a random element, with coin flips. It suggests like throwing a die, or using some electronic process. And yeah, he said, let's study this as well. I don't know of any probabilistic algorithm which he invented, but he suggests the model, and he suggests many ways of generating randomness through a variety of physical processes in other papers. So he's talking about it in several other papers. And of course, the field of probabilistic algorithms, I don't have to tell you how important it is. That's one thing that appears in the paper, but he thinks about randomness even deeper and goes to discuss pseudo-randomness, something we are, anyway, occupied me a lot of several decades. So here's some things he says. It is not normally possible to determine from observing a machine whether it has a random element, or a similar effect may be obtained by deterministic devices that are using as their random source something like, say, the digits of pi. So he's already talking about distinguishing probabilistic and deterministic machines. There is work today about certified randomness, trying to make sure that some process, some algorithm is probabilistic. Anyway, it's a fascinating topic that he's suggesting going into. Even more fascinating is his remarks about what is pseudo-random, what is pseudo-random function. So in the famous paper of Goldreich, Goldwasser, and Micali, who defined pseudo-random functions and constructed them, they quote him. They quote Turing from that paper, where he's basically suggesting the definition. He said, I've set up on my Manchester computer a small program with only 1,000 units of storage, whereby a machine is supplied with one 16-figure number, replies with another one in 2 seconds, and I would defy anyone to predict the value of a different input after seeing the output of some other values. So it basically says the definition of something pseudo-random is that you see any number of values you want, and then you should predict another random value. That's the same definition used by GGM in their paper. Again, pseudo-randomness is a huge field that still occupies us quite a bit, understanding the power of randomness in computation. Now I get to the beef of the paper, which is talking about machine learning and, in fact, machine education. He talks, there are lots of quotes here. He's talking to an audience. I mean, you should think he's talking about computers where computers barely exist. And not only do they barely exist, what are they used for? They are mainly, those that are constructed are used either for applications in war, trajectories of missiles and the simulations of nuclear reactions, and IBM is formed that all of business applications. But Turing already starts to think about making machines that learn and think and maybe intelligent, and how to do that. And he writes about it extensively. So he says, for example, that you have to allow learning machines. So first of all, he talks about machines having to learn from experience. Machine can change itself. It's a set of arguments he gives in the paper against some objections that machines can be intelligent. So one of them, he says, machine can modify itself. It's not like a car, or it's not like a tractor. It can modify itself. He talks about having to tolerate errors, says that we humans err all the time. You cannot expect an infallible machine to be intelligent. You have to allow it to err. And he talks about an analogy with learning, the way a baby learns, and he separates three basic components: what you are born with, or your initial program or brain, then what you are educated by. He said, well, let me skip this and I'll go back to it. The third one is learning from experience, so just exposed to events and modify the program accordingly. And the second bullet here is about educating machines, not just letting them learn from experience, but actually teaching them specific things like rules of logic or something like that in order to enhance their capabilities. And just as I was preparing this lecture, I got a copy of Les Valiant's new book, The Theory of the Educable, basically talking about educating machines, educating humans, what separates humans from other species. Extremely interesting book. But he points out that since Turing suggested that learning is not, intelligent machines not just learn from experience, but would benefit a lot from directed education. He's suggesting a model. And I was thinking that Turing would be, just as an example of how the study of these ideas blew up, just even looking at Les Valiant's book. His previous book on Park learning was, of course, essentially talking about tolerance of errors by learning machines. And his previous book to that, The Circuits of the Mind, talks about a model for basically for the brain. Turing was obsessed with understanding, with asking biologists about the size of brains of humans, trying to understand what size of memory will an intelligent computer need. So, and he thought about all of these things, and of course, again, this grew, and well, we know that today is a very different world, and I want to talk about that. So I want to get back to his maybe most famous part of this paper, which is his definition of, let's say, intelligence. So that's the paper. And the first sentence in the paper is basically how do I even define, this question, can machines think? And it tells you, one way I can do it, I can, I just take these words and say precisely what I mean by them. And another way is just test it, very pragmatic approach. And he says that, the first style, which is the normal philosophy, so he's breaking away from hundreds of years of philosophy, which try to define notions that are sort of somewhat general or complex. And he says, these definitions, they are great, have values, but, you never get universal agreement. They are not falsifiable, they are not testable. We won't agree. So he says, forget this. Let's just test it. This is see whether they are actually thinking, and you'll see the next slide, which you are familiar with, how he does it. But the point is that definitions of this sort, operational definitions, and we'll talk about this, can be precise, they can be testable, they can be, falsifiable and so on, but they can also be revolutionary. And I'll give examples, but beforehand, here's a picture you all know, the famous imitation game, Turing's way of testing whether, let's say, a robot is intelligent or can converse with a person. Of course, today in the world of chatbots, we know the answer, but then we didn't. The definition is very simple. You simply subject whatever you are testing to some referee. Can be, in his case, he suggests any human, and you see what confidence the person testing it has, whether it interacts with a human or interacts with a robot. So such confidence is some number between 0 and 1. There are these two words, and if every person testing it comes up with almost the same answer, then you say it's intelligent or it converses with a person or whatever you want to name as the success of this experiment. It just says that the two scenarios are indistinguishable. In this case, this is a test. And this test passes, then you say yes. If it doesn't, a particular robot may be really bad. This is Turing's suggestion. It's, of course, very informal. He's talking about people measuring this, performing this test. But the idea, this template for a definition, this operational definition of a concept like intelligence, had an amazing influence on our field, on computer science, and I want to tell you a few examples. So in the theory of computations, analogs were defined for lots of other notions, not intelligence. The paradigm is the same. The paradigm says that two things are the same, are defined to be the same, if they cannot be told apart by any reasonable test, so it's corresponding to the notion. That's the paradigm, the imitation game. And these definitions of different concepts, which I show you, have amazing influence on everything in our lives. And the examples I give you are cryptography, pseudo-randomness, and privacy. But the point, which I think is very important, I think of our field as a theory of computation really is a field of definitions. Definitions are primary. So correct definitions, like Turing's definition of computation, are absolutely fundamental. When you get the right definition, then theories, theorems, proofs, constructions, they follow. You just have to get the definition right, and let's see some examples where people got the right definitions and these theories and applications followed. So in cryptography, the basic question is, what is a secure encryption? When is an encryption scheme secure? And you just build an imitation game. You say, here's what I want. In this famous paper of Goldwasser and Micali, before they came to MIT, as students, graduate students, say, here's what you want. This is the strongest definition you can think about. This encryption, when it takes arbitrary two different messages, and the tester here is anything that's computable, namely efficiently computable, try to say whether it's M0 or M1. If no algorithm can distinguish this case for no pair of messages, then we can call the encryption scheme secure. Of course, they do much more than that. They give you a secure encryption scheme. They show you that it must, this definition already tells you that it must be a probabilistic scheme. Let me not go into this, but think about it. Deterministic schemes will never pass this test. So we have a definition of secure encryption as an imitation game. And in fact, all over cryptography, you see this kind of definitions. In general, when you look at cryptographic protocols, maybe with many parties, you want to say, they are run over some whatever internet distributed system. You want to say it's secure. How do you say that it's secure? How do you show that, no set of people learns more than they should, or no bad guys can influence the result more than, it should? And secure elections is as good an example as any. And in order to define when it is secure, you build an imitation game. Again, you simply say, let's compare it to an ideal situation. And the ideal situation is one in which you have a trusted party. Trusted party, I called it a government. It doesn't have to be a government. It shouldn't be a government. But in elections, it's still a government. Anyway, an ideal situation. And then you, again, subject it to the same kind of test. You want to say that this protocol is good if, for any set of people, the communications they see cannot be distinguished by efficient algorithms from the communications they see in the presence of an ideal trusted party. So you have a definition. It's a key definition all over cryptography. Again, via an imitation game. Here's another field. Here we want to understand randomness, pseudo-randomness. When is some distribution good, pseudo-random, looks like random? Well, an imitation game gives you the definition. You could do it yourself by now, right? You say, you put on one side this distribution you are given. On the other side, you put the perfect, ideal, uniform distribution. And you say, my distribution is pseudo-random if no efficient algorithm can tell apart this distribution from the uniform distribution. And again, also here, it's not just a definition. There are constructions of pseudo-random distributions. And yeah, it's a big field. The last example I want to give you is that of privacy, and particular privacy always comes contrasted with the utility of, let's say, information in a database. And classically, for 50 years, everybody knows that when you have queries to a database, you want to preserve privacy. You have to somehow filter the answers so that it does not reveal individual records. But until 20 years ago, we didn't have really a theoretical mathematical model until differential privacy came along in these very important papers. And what's the definition here? It's again an imitation game. Differential privacy says that a filtering mechanism is good if no matter what query of the set of queries allowed, no matter what query you do, there is no distinction between any pair of adjacent databases. Maybe one database and another database in which some pair, let's say Jane Doe, appears in one, doesn't appear in the other, and all other records are the same. If no query can differentiate this, then being Jane Doe, I don't mind participating in these databases and telling the truth about it, because it's indistinguishable from me not being there. Okay, so that's the definition. Of course, it took off, and the government is using it, and all the big companies are using it to release data. The US Census 2020 uses it, and yeah, It took off. Anyway, the definition is through an imitation game. Okay, good. Let me spend the last 5 minutes on the last paper, Turing's paper on morphogenesis. It's called the chemical basis of morphogenesis. It's amazing. It's a paper in biology, and it's one of the most quoted papers in all of biology. And this is a far bigger field than computer science. It's unbelievable. This paper is still quoted every year now, even now. So what's the morphogenesis problem? You look at this picture, this zebra, and you ask yourself, well, you know, what's going on? We all start from a homogeneous, you know, fertilized egg, all mammals, let's say. You know, where are the stripes coming from? Certainly not symmetric. Forget the stripes. I mean, the legs, the body, where does it come from? You know, you start from something symmetric and you get asymmetry. And not only do you get asymmetry, this asymmetry, this structure, you know, all zebras look like that, right? Or all humans in this area look basically the same if you don't look at details. So how, you know, how do you explain this? I find this, you know, a huge problem. I mean, I wouldn't know how to start even thinking about this. And Turing, you know, decided to think about it. It actually interested him even as a child. And because of time, let me not read to you the quotes except this one, which I really like because it shows his style. You know, in this section, a mathematical model of the growing embryo will be described. Okay, it's going for a growing embryo. The model will be a simplification and an idealization, and consequently a falsification. It is to be hoped that the features retained for discussion are those that are of greatest importance to the present state of knowledge, and the number of references shows that, you know, he got it right. So he's suggesting, you know, this model of reaction diffusion systems, which I'll describe briefly. Here's the embryo. It's a ring of cells, okay? And he has both a discrete and continuous model. And a state, morphogens are some chemicals, let's say 2 or 3 chemicals. And a state describes how much of each chemical do you have in each cell, okay? And there are 2 things that happen, the reactions and diffusion. Reaction is some chemical reaction between these morphogens in each cell. And if you know, values between adjacent cells of chemical A are different, then there is diffusion trying to balance them. This is the you know, extent of chemistry here. So you start with an initial state where all cells have the same amount of each chemical. And it evolves by quantity changing if there is you know, reaction and diffusion. Now, of course, if you start with anything homogeneous, it will remain homogeneous. Nothing will ever change. But he argues, you know, this is a stable state. However, you know, there's nothing like perfect equality in nature. There may be slight variations. When there are slight variations, you get out of this unstable equilibrium and move to something else. And over time, he proves, these are mathematical proofs. Actually, it's beautiful how he writes to biologists. He finds the simplest example and the simplest demonstrations. Yeah, I use Fourier analysis and spherical functions and so on. You don't have to know them. Here's the you know, example. Anyway, what is important here is this introduces something that we do now normally in lots of interactions. It's a computational. This is basically describes the type of computer, right? You evolve states like in a Turing machine, only in parallel. And he's suggesting a computational model of a phenomenon. And in fact, it does it not just with a ring of cells, it does a 3-dimensional one, and it does a grid one. And there he introduces, long before Ulam and von Neumann introduces cellular automata, he's introducing them. So again, an idea far before what I thought was the origin. And let me not go into them, but these are phenomena explained by these different ones. The first two, he proves theorems about the various structures you get when you apply this model. In the third case, he does a simulation. And like I said, this may be the largest output in the future of theoretical computer science, I think, the interactions between computation and all sciences, in which you introduce computation into various models of nature. This happens a lot already in interactions with biology, economics, social science, physics, math, and I'm sure there'll be many, many more. Okay, summarizing. Yeah, I just want to say I'm completely awed by this work. Ending, well, I suggest that you have the experience I went through. It's really remarkable what kind of thinker Turing was and what impacts he had. He managed to be at the same time all sorts of thinkers. I mean, certainly a scientist studying nature, a mathematician proving theorems, very philosophical. And I didn't talk about this, but he actually loved building things. And there's a variety of fundamental issues that he studies with absolutely no fear. You get really a very strong sense of his reading. And he believes that whatever the issue is, you should do theory about it. He's extremely critical. I mentioned that in the intelligence paper, he prepares himself to rebuttals, and he says, one may object saying this. Here is my answer. One may object to this. Here is my answer. And he's very critical, saying, in this case, my answer is not so strong. My reaction is not. He's he's brutally honest. His thinking and writing are extremely clear. You'll see it when you look. And looking for, obviously, Einstein famously said that the model should be as simple as possible, but not simpler. So Turing implements this. And he certainly doesn't rush to publish. He writes a paper when he understands everything he can hope to understand about the subject. So my final slide for every talk in the last few years is if you want to know about computational complexity, many facets of it, this is really an invitation written for everybody, I'm sure, in this audience, and you don't have to buy it, it's free on my website. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Questions? The microphones on both sides. So let me ask you a question. So I didn't read all of these papers, but I did read the intelligence papers.
Right.
And I wonder what we can talk a little bit about why he goes away from aiming to define intelligence, in your opinion, and what does that teach us about what we're doing with machine intelligence today?
I think that he suggests a way to go about this kind of definitions. It doesn't shy away from, it just doesn't say it should be defined in words, like typical philosophical papers, but should be defined via actual testing. So we can subject chatbots to, and people are doing that, right? They say, they let humans interact with chatbots and say whether this is a good poem versus a poem of famous poets or things of this type.
So, yeah, so I think the chatbots do pass the Turing test, but are they intelligent?
No, so you can call it whatever you want. They pass this test, and then you can name it. Some people will name it intelligence, but not general intelligence, right? There's AGI now. But this is just, the name doesn't matter as long as you know the set of tests it passes. This is really the definition. Then you can name it.
Great. So we have some questions from the audience.
Hello. Thank you for the great talk. I have a question just about your thoughts on randomness in machine learning in general. So I know a lot of your work was focused on showing that like randomness is not strictly necessary in parts of complexity theory that I don't understand super well. But I work in machine learning, and we train neural networks, and there's like two sources of randomness that seem quite important, both the random init of the parameters in neural networks and the random batch sampling during training. And I'm curious if you have thoughts about like whether you think that randomness is strictly necessary in the success of modern machine learning, and if you have, I don't know, general thoughts about interesting research directions that we should think more about.
So it's a somewhat long answer. So the question was about the randomness used in training neural nets. Is it necessary, basically? And the result that Daniela described in introducing me, namely saying randomness is really not needed in efficient processes, and this is certainly an efficient process, you should qualify it in several ways. One, it uses an assumption. Assumption is something like P is different than NP, so people are willing to believe it. But you need an assumption. The second is that it applies to some collection of tasks, but not to all of them. Suppose the task is to generate a random number. This you cannot do without randomness. So it's rather for decision problems, like determining whether a number is prime, and you either use randomness or not, then you never need randomness for this type of task. So training, if you can, training a neural net, if you train it for a classifier, then under, P different NP or hardness assumption of this nature, you don't need it. But, if some demand is about, like in cryptography, you really need randomness because you generate your secret keys this way. So for this task, you do need randomness.
Let's go to the question on the other side, and then we'll come to you, Pete.
Thank you for the amazing presentation. I actually have a question when you talk about, is machine really learning? Do you think that machine is actually learning like the human knowledge right now? And do you think that, the human knowledge human intelligence can apply to machine intelligence at this stage?
I'm very radical in this sense. I don't see distinction between humans and machines. I mean, I think we are machines. Certainly I am. We are, maybe machine of a different nature than my laptop, but we are machines. We are subject to the same, laws of physics. So whatever happens to us and happens in learning machines can be similar. I don't see any reason that, I never saw any reason. This is way before, when I was an undergrad, I didn't see why people said that, chess will never be played better by machines than by humans. And, I wasn't sure what the question was about because I didn't know in what sense machines are different. So people love to talk about this, but they never define what a machine is and, or what a human is. I would like to see a definition that distinguishes them. I don't know what. Of course, if you go into the fact that one is built from carbon and the other from silicon, I don't think that's an interesting distinction. So I think the answer is yes, yeah. I don't see any reason that they cannot be the same.
I look forward to arguing with you about
very
that.
Very good, yeah, I
Pete.
love arguments.
Pete.
So thank you for a wonderful talk. Very appropriate for a Turing Award winner. I was struck by your discussion of the analogs of the imitation game applied in other domains. But it also struck me that in many of those examples, the imitation game has led us to develop a deeper understanding of the underlying problems. And so far, I haven't seen that deeper understanding arise from our use of the imitation game to address Turing's question about whether something is truly intelligent. And I'll tell you why I'm bothered by this. I work in the medical area, machine learning applied to medicine. And so there's a big practical question of, is it safe to apply these sorts of large language model techniques to things like summarizing medical records? And people are taking the imitation game approach. They ask a group of doctors to do it, they ask a computer to do it, then they get some experts to look at the two and they decide if they're roughly equivalent or not. But that doesn't give us any insight into how these complex transformer models are actually able to do what they do.
So yeah, I completely agree with you. And in fact, you may know that mountains of papers and books were written about the Turing test after it was introduced, attacking it from various sides, including what you are suggesting, because it's not formal. What I wanted to point out here is not talking about Turing and his intelligence test, but how the template of comparing these two scenarios, defining things to be indistinguishable under a set of tests, can move to the mathematical side, can supply us with absolutely fundamental definitions that create amazing areas with both theoretical and practical implications, different than understanding LLMs. Okay, so that was my point. This template has been extremely influential in the theory of computation.
We're out of time. Let's give Avi one more round of big applause. Thank you for a very inspiring talk. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us.